Mute the room.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we are calling this meeting back to order, and we're at 4.1. We have Elise here. Great, thank you. Great. Welcome back. And we have Elise Pillar here and Marie-Lou LeBlanc here to talk to us about the WildSafe BC SLRD program. I will start by saying we are extremely tight on time today, so you are limited to 10 minutes for this presentation, please. Thank you. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marie-Lou LeBlanc, Resource Recovery Coordinator. So I will leave it to Elise to start the presentation right away.
Great, thank you, everyone. My name is Elise Puller, and I am the WildSafe BC Community Coordinator this season, and I'm calling in from Squamish. And yeah, I'd like to just introduce to you what this season looked like as our 4th year within the SLRD region as the WildSafe BC program. Next slide, please. Great. First, I just wanted to quickly acknowledge the fact that the SLRD is located on the traditional territories of the Lillooet, Squamish, Statliam, Statlo, Tsleil-Waututh, Entalakum, Silcotin, and Secwepemc nations, and really grateful to have been able this season to work, play, and kind of educate on these lands. Next slide, please. So just quick overview, I'm gonna go over the human-wildlife conflicts that were most commonly seen this season within the region and hotspots for those conflicts, as well as looking at the Wildlife Alert Reporting Program from 2016 to 2022, because data wasn't available this year quite yet, but that might change in the next month or so. Looking at community outreach as well, just kind of explaining what kind of outreach went on this year, and then recommendations for future seasons within this program. Next slide, please. Great. So something that I thought would be relevant to share is the main kind of human-wildlife conflicts that occurred within the SLRD. So hotspots for reports, emails to myself and to the COS. One region that I'd love to talk about is the Pemberton Meadows. So within the Pemberton Meadows, there's been increased interactions with grizzly bears and local farm families, especially to do with crops such as blueberries, carrots, lettuce, other kinds of things as well, but those have been the main kind of reports. And then cougars have been noted to be interacting a bit more with different livestock, rams and alpacas. And there is increasing concern in this area for the amount of interactions and the habituation of especially grizzly bears in the region, as well as lack of being able to communicate with conservation officers in a timely manner to be able to avoid these kinds of interactions from occurring. Britannia Beach is another one that has been noted in previous years as a hotspot in general, to do with black bears. I haven't heard of any significant reports of bears entering into enclosures or anything like that, but there is conflict with black bears and the main attractant, which would be the garbage bins in the area, as well as fruit trees. And then backcountry sites that were noted as hotspots that I was able to visit this season due to increased amount of people visiting these sites were areas like Tenkill Lake and Semaphore, Seed Peak area in the Pinecone Provincial Park, Water Sprite Lake, Callahan Lake, and others, but those are the main ones. And then campgrounds that we kept an eye on this year was the new Whistler Olympic Park campground, which Mary Lou and I were able to visit and provide resources for, as well as the Squamish Valley campsite. Next slide, please. Great, so these are just a couple of charts from up to 2022, like I mentioned, noting the areas that had in the first kind of graph their black bear reports to the COS through the WARP kind of system. And so areas C and D are the areas of most reports for black bears, which makes sense because those are the areas where there are large populations of people as well as large populations of black bears. And then beyond black bears, the other most reported wildlife that has been reported on is grizzly bears, then cougars, and then coyotes, deer, bobcats, wolf, and others to follow. But grizzly bears are definitely increasing in conflict as their populations recover due to changes in regulations a few years ago. Next slide, please. Bin tagging is a program within the WildSafe program, and I was able to go to Britannia Beach to tag bins this season 3 separate times, and these bins were tagged if they were out the night before pickup, because that's when black bears are able to access them. And we did have a decrease from year to year as this program has been implemented due to enforcement of the bylaw of putting out trash early. So we can see that education is working and fines as well are working in order to change the behaviors around putting bins out early and attracting black bears and other wildlife. But there's still work to be done. There still are bins out, and so there are still people that need to be educated, and this seems like a really effective way to do that. Next slide, please. Then another part of the program this year was the WildSafe Ranger program, so educating youth who also go home and educate their parents oftentimes about wildlife, different attractant sources, and I was able to meet up with Sea to Sky play groups, reading groups, and a couple of school groups as well to educate about these issues from a young age. Next slide, please. Information booths. Some of the highlights this season were heading to the Pemberton Farmers Market, Lillooet Farmers Market, as well as Furry Beach and Britannia Beach, a community day, and then the trailheads I mentioned as well, just setting up an information booth to educate folks about proper use of bear spray, how to see signs of wildlife on the trail, and how to behave around wildlife if they do see it, as well as at the farmers markets talking to a lot of locals about conflicts they've been having and potential solutions like electric fencing and bear spray and other deterrents for those issues that they are facing. Next slide, please. Community workshops were one of my favorite things to run this year. A lot of the workshops I did were around bear spray use because a lot of folks in the SLRD region own bear spray but don't know how to use it, or don't own bear spray but could have used it in certain situations. And so these workshops were a really effective way to have a hands-on learning experience, and that's what the photo is shown there, is in the Pemberton Meadows, educating a few members of different families in the region on how to use bear spray properly, and also how to know what to do if they spot a bear on their property in order to get it off the property and deter it so that it doesn't become habituated, which is becoming more and more a problem in the Pemberton Meadows. Then also workshops on wildlife awareness and worksite safety for different industries within the region, and a presentation to welcome Whistler for new Canadians as well, to teach folks about wildlife in a realistic way, so they're not fearful, but also keep wildlife safe and their community members safe as well. Next slide, please. So finally, I just wanted to go over a few recommendations that I have, being the coordinator for this year and talking to a lot of community members on their needs. So these are less my thoughts and more community members' thoughts that I'm just translating into kind of wild safe terminology and into potential tangible solutions. So the first would be to focus on an electric fence cost sharing program for next year, which has existed in previous seasons, but was kind of slow to get running this year with the Wild Safe BC program, just due to a change in staffing. So really focusing on electric fence cost sharing as a solution-based suggestion to community members, especially within the Pemberton Meadows and the Lillooet region, because there's a need and a request for that resource. Also improving collaboration with Indigenous communities if possible through potentially an allocated SLRD wildlife safety fund, as our current funds don't allow for the wildlife community or the wild safe community coordinator to interact as much as we could and should with those Indigenous communities within the region. And then also, there was a suggestion from within the Pemberton Meadows area to have a specific position, whether this is through the COS or through WildSafe, Bear Smart, or other means, that's a bear specialist of sorts. And this would be a position that could actually spend a lot of time within the Pemberton Meadows and help community members be less fearful of interactions with grizzlies and young children, that kind of thing. And then my last point, I'm just going to wrap this up here in the next 20 seconds, is to potentially have more communication between Squamish, Whistler, COS, and wildlife safety officers, as well as the Wild Safe BC program, because we're all doing really great work, and there could be less reinventing the wheel if we all had opportunities to collaborate more often. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And sorry we had to cut you short, but because I think we would all love to ask you 100 questions. There's some really big interest in this topic in our, I think, the whole region. But we do have another delegation coming in momentarily, and so so thank you. If we do have questions, we will forward them on to Marie-Lou. And yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Ms. Dewar.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm just jumping in here. My name is Claire Dewar. I'm a senior planner at the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. I can give a really brief high-level overview of the staff report for the North Arm Farm Brewery Food and Beverage Lounge GFA Expansion Zoning Amendment, which is being presented for consideration of first and second reading, as well as initiating the referrals. And there's also a recommendation that the board receive the draft October 10th Area C Agriculture Advisory Committee minutes. So the SLRD received a zoning amendment application from North Arm Farm to increase the gross floor area of the food and beverage service lounge associated with the brewery at 1888 Sea to Sky Highway 99. This was for a site-specific text amendment that would provide for a food and beverage service lounge with 125 meters squared of indoor gross floor area and 125 meters squared of outdoor gross floor area, as per the maximum set by the Agriculture Land Reserve Use Regulation, noting that the current SRD zoning bylaw provides for 16 meters of indoor and outdoor GFA. So staff are comfortable that the parcel can accommodate the proposed increase in GFA, as well as the associated parking, noting that the application remains within this 5% parcel or lot coverage limit, which is recommended for farm-related commercial and farm-related industrial uses, as per the ALC policy L24. And staff are also comfortable the site is safe for intended use based on the submitted geotechnical report. As such, zoning amendment bylaw 1829-2023 is being presented for consideration of first and second reading. I wanted to highlight a couple of new pieces of information since the application came forward to the board. One, just highlighting the public hearing waiver notice that did take place as per the board's recommendation. So this included neighbor notifications to all property owners or tenants within 150 meters of the subject property. Newspaper ads were also placed in the Peak magazine, and notice was on the SLRD website and available at the SLRD office. We met with the Area C Agriculture Advisory Committee on October 10th to review and provide input on this zoning amendment application. And the AAC passed a motion unanimously. The motion that was passed unanimously was that the Area C Agriculture Advisory Committee is supportive of the North Arm Farm zoning amendment application, which proposes a text amendment to increase the gross floor area of the food and beverage service lands associated with the brewery. And I just wanted to highlight a couple aspects of the discussion at the AAC committee level, as these are this is our farming community, and these are it's sort of they have really good insight to provide when we are considering these applications for farm related commercial. And some of the discussion points that came forward was really looking at this ALC policy recommendation around the parcel coverage. Also that the parking requirements were able to be met within the existing parking area and within the farm plate of it. So those are kind of key considerations from the committee's perspective as to why they supported this application. And then the other piece I wanted to highlight was the actual public hearing waiver submissions themselves. So the proponent did post a public information display at the barn and at the North Arm Farm to inform the public about the zoning amendment application. And this included a petition and close to 100 signatures of support were gathered from visitors. The proponent also collected letters of support from 5 neighbors, and those are included in the staff report as Appendix B. And I also am noting that there have been no other public hearing waiver submissions received to date. And that, yeah, this was the deadline today to receive. So we haven't received any other submissions other than what the proponent provided. And in terms of next steps, today there's the board will be considering giving first and second reading and then initiating the referral process. And then the next pieces in this process would be third reading, MOTI approval, and then adoption of the bylaw. And I'll leave it at that and happy to take any questions the board may have. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Just the pitch sort of speaks to the location of the parking and the new structures being sort of on exclusively already disturbed areas as opposed to new. That's not specified in the bylaw. Does staff have any concern about that?
So in terms of the actual location of where
Yes.
the GFA would be located. So the parking is required in our zoning to be within the farm residential home plate. So that's a given. And then our zoning and the ALR use regulation doesn't allow us to dictate where the farm related commercial uses are located. We are able to work with the gross floor area piece, and that's sort of what the zoning speaks to. But thank you for the question.
Any other questions? Russell?
Yeah, can I move all 3 DACs or?
I would like to move the draft October 10th AAC minutes first.
Okay.
So if you could move that, and then moved and seconded by Director Birch Jones. Any comments on the minutes? No. Thank you to the committee for their engagement. I will call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And then you can move first and second reading, and you can move the referrals together. So moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Birch Jones. Any comments? Okay, I'll call
Just one.
Sure.
Thank you, Claire, for the work you've done on this. Very good work.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. All right, with that, I will call the question. All in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Dewar.
Thank you.
Look at that promptness. So now we're at 1:30 for our next. Can we go in early?
Yeah, this here in the waiting room, so just let it.
So now we're going to 9.5 because this was a time of presentation from Mike Strain. So we're bouncing around as we do, and that's okay. Because we're ahead of time. Yes, we are doing information report regarding the Catalina Creek debris flow mitigation project status update number 2. And we have Mr. Strain here who hit the tops of the waves on this report. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. All right. As was just said, I'm Mike Strain, Senior Project Manager with CapEx Projects, and I'm working as Project Manager for the SLRD on this project. This presentation is to provide the board with an update on the project status. Next slide, please. Here's a rough agenda of my presentation today. I will be speaking to project governance, project scope, budget, schedule, risks, and next steps. Next slide, please. Before we get going, I'd like to provide some context around this project, around the project governance and structure for your awareness. Shown on this slide is the project org chart. Since this is an SLRD-led project, the SLRD board sits at the top with the steering committee reporting directly to the board via the project sponsor. The steering committee is made up of 5 SLRD staff members who are voting members, plus the president of Lillooet Lake Estates, who is a non-voting member, acting as in an important advisory role. The steering committee meets monthly and is responsible for overseeing the project and providing overall direction and key decision-making for the project, with particular reference to scope, schedule, budget, procurement, and communications. The steering committee is accountable for the successful delivery of the project within the schedule and budget assigned, and will provide progress reports and updates to the board as necessary, which is why we're here today. Next slide, please. As presented before, this project is located on the north side of Lillooet Lake, with the creek passing through Crown land and land owned by LLE. Next slide. The project scope is to design, construct, and establish operation and maintenance of a debris flow mitigation structure for the Catalina Creek at Lillooet Lake Estates. The objective is to reduce the risk to the community and potential for loss of life by increasing the capacity of the existing channel to manage future debris flows of up to 100,000 cubic meters through the community under a new Forest Service Road bridge and into the lake. On the basis of the preliminary design report commissioned by LLE in 2016, the mitigation structure is being designed to manage a debris flow event with a 1,000-year return period, which has an expected debris flow volume of 100,000 cubic meters. Next slide. The project includes approximately 900 meters of creek excavation, 970 meters of training berms to contain future debris flows and redirect them towards the creek channel so they can be conveyed through to the lake. The project also includes coordination with the Ministry of Forests for the replacement of the existing Forest Service Road bridge to suit the new creek dimensions. The Crown land can be seen here in the blue shaded section. Crown land tenure area will be the area required for the berms and channel that sit on Crown land. Next slide, please. Here we see the profile of the proposed creek and berms at a particular location closer to the top end of the project. The green area represents the excavation or the cut for the new channel, and the blue areas represent the berms or the fills. You can see the existing creek channel between the left training berm and the future creek channel, which gives you an idea of the sense of the scale of the new channel compared to the existing channel. The engineering team is currently working on refinement of the alignments of the channel and berms and confirming the cross-sectional design. Next slide, please. The current estimate to complete the project is 8.1 million, while the current approved project budget is 6 million. This is based on the preliminary design and is unchanged from the last project update presentation. We are anticipating an update to the cost estimate with the 50% design in the coming weeks. The 50% design is the next design. This is the next step in the design process and will show channel alignment in plan view and profiles in cross sections. Include updated geotechnical and environmental reports and provide an updated cost estimate based on the current knowledge of the project. The SLRD has also applied for a third grant through the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund as a mitigation against the risk that the ICIP grant is unsuccessful. The outcome of the DMAF is expected to be known in the spring of 2024, while we're currently waiting on the outcome of the ICIP grant. Next. Since the last project update, we have developed the communications plan and project webpage, risk management plan, continued engaging with Indigenous communities and reaching out to stakeholders. We are currently working with Indigenous communities to understand their requirements and any inputs and concerns they may have, and are also working with the various ministries of the province to coordinate the bridge design, permits, and Crown land tenure requirements. We've appointed Kerwood Lydell as prime engineering consultant, who have now completed the majority of their engineering site investigations and are in the midst of detailed design with 50% design and cost estimate anticipated in the upcoming weeks. We are currently focused on permitting and Crown land tenure and working through land requirements for stat right-of-way through the LLE parcels that will be required for construction and maintenance of the works. Getting the engineering and design consultant under contract took longer than originally expected. To mitigate this risk of delay carrying through the schedule, we've decoupled the tree removal from the construction for phase 1 so that it can be completed in advance of construction. The delay has also pushed out the planned date for the construction tender from January 2024 to the spring of 2024. Tendering in the spring or later in the season for a construction project such as this carries a risk that the market will not have the capacity to take on this project, which could result in fewer bids and higher pricing. The project team is looking into various strategies to mitigate this risk. Next slide. The top 5 risks that were identified by the project team in May are still considered to be the most significant risks of the project. Permitting and approvals, delays for which can cause negative effects on schedule and cost. The Crown land tenure resolution before the board today, item 9.6 on the agenda, will allow this application to move forward and help mitigate this risk. Finalizing the statutory right-of-way in time for construction. This is an area that we will be keenly focused on for the next several months leading up to construction, with a priority to finalize the statutory right-of-way of phase 1. That's the lower section from the lake, roughly just past the bridge. Negative outcome of the ICIP grant application. This risk is still outstanding as we have yet to hear on this. Upward pressure on costs. We are currently aware of a number of potential risks to costs and are working to mitigate their impact. These include things like escalation, maybe more than was anticipated in the grant applications. Costs associated with land interest may be more than anticipated. And there's a potential for increased soil disposal and trucking costs. Schedule delays. The design phase is currently forecasted to end later than anticipated, potentially putting the tender into a less than favorable time of year. And we are working to bring this forward to allow tendering to proceed as early as possible in 2024. Next slide, please. Our next steps include, following today's board resolution, if approved, we plan to make application for the Crown Land tenure, which will be followed by a number of permit applications, including under the Water Sustainability and Dike Maintenance Acts. Normally, the Crown Land tenure process would take a year or two, but since this project has an open file that was dated back to LLE's application a number of years ago and is a public safety project, the province has advised that they anticipate 6-month turnaround. 50% design and cost estimate are expected in the coming weeks, which will allow work to proceed with the statutory right-of-way and will allow the project team to evaluate the sufficiency of the project budget. We're also in the process of confirming the scope and responsibilities for work at the Forest Service Road Bridge to determine what the final design will look like and what the ministry is responsible for versus what the debris and flow mitigation project is responsible for. Tree clearing scope for phase 1 is anticipated to be completed prior to March 15th, 2024, ahead of the bird nesting window. And detailed design is now anticipated to be complete in March 2024, with tender issuance to occur shortly after. Next slide, please. Moving forward, we anticipate the following touch points with the board. Number 1, considering adoption of first security issuing bylaw, either November 2023 or spring 2024. This will depend on some key information that we are waiting on, such as confirmation of the ICIP grant and update of the project cost estimate. Number 2, receive project status update. Number 3, expected in early 2024. Number 3, approval prior to construction tender issuance, early 2024, as this is required by the SLRD's purchasing policy. And number 4, other items requiring board approval to be determined as and when required. Next slide. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Does anyone have a question? I see no questions. We look forward to the progress on this. And I guess we'll see you again soon with some good news, hopefully.
I hope so.
Amazing. All right, could I have someone make a motion to receive the report? Moved by Director Rich Jones, seconded by Director Pettengill. Comments? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Strain.
Thank you.
All right, let's go. I'm closed. Can I have someone move that we close this? Yeah. Moved by Director Rich Jones.
That old bridge when you guys are.
Thank you. We'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.